They gave, questioning no more the strangeness of her fate, their pride and loved one to the great blind king, the regal pillar of fallen mightiness, and the stately care one woman once a queen, who now hoped nothing for herself from life, but all things only hope for her one child. They parted from her with pain-fraught, burdened heart, helpless against the choice of Savitri's heart. They left her to her rapture and her doom.
Good morning. So it's a beautiful darshan day today, nice, cool and overcast. The day when Sri Krishna descended into Sri Aurobindo's physical body, what he called the descent of the overmind Godhead, preparing the way for the supramental realization, which he would pursue for the rest of his life, to bring that consciousness down into the physical. So we're continuing in book 7, the book of Yoga, Canto 1, the joy of union, the ordeal of the foreknowledge of death, and the heart's grief and pain. We've completed the important book of the Book of Fate, where Narad has foreseen and told of the impending death of Satyavan. And now Savitri returns to the forest hermitage to begin her short married life with Satyavan in the hermitage, bringing with her her parents and their retinue from the palace in Madra. And there, King Asapati hands over his daughter, Savitri, to the blind king and queen and their son, Satyavan. To carry out her mission, her fate there with them. Savitri begins her life with Satyavan, and at first it's a beautiful dream living in the forest with her beloved Satyavan. But slowly, as some time passes and the climate changes to storms and rainfall, her mood begins to shift. She begins to feel that grief, that fear of this approaching death in their lives. And as she begins to feel this, she tries to escape from it into the bliss, the joy of union, even more intensely seeking Satyavan's love. But it doesn't work, because the more she flees into this love, the more intense the grief follows after some time, especially when he goes off into the forest to cut trees or to carry out his duties there. And she's left alone. So we've come to page 469, about 2/3 of the way down. I don't have the line number, but it begins, thus swaying in strong gusts of happiness. So that's where we'll begin. And Margaret, would you like to start?
Thus, swaying in strong gusts of happiness, and swimming in foreboding sombrous waves, and feeding sorrow and terror with her heart, for now there sat among her bosom's guest, or in her inner chambers spaced apart. Her eyes starred blind into the future's night. Out of her separate self she looked and saw, moving amid the unconscious faces loved, in mind a stranger, though in heart so near, the ignorant smiling world go happily by, upon its way towards an unknown doom, and wondered at the careless lives of men. As if in different worlds they walked, though close, they confident of the returning sun, they wrapped in little hours, hopes and tasks. She in her dreadful knowledge was alone. The rich and happy secrecy that once enshrined her as if in a silver bower, apart in a bright nest of thoughts and dreams, made room for tragic hours of solitude and lonely grief that none could share or know. A body seeing the end too soon of joy and the fragile happiness of its mortal love. Her quiet visage, still and sweet and calm, her graceful daily acts were now a mask. In vain she looked upon her depths to find a ground of stillness and the spirit's peace.
Thank you. So Savitri is swaying between these two moods, strong gusts of happiness and foreboding somber waves. So she's sitting with this grief deep in her heart, alone in that grief, for she cannot share it with anyone else around her. And there's this kind of poignant lines or image that she's moving amid the unconscious faces loved. In mind a stranger, though in heart so near. The ignorant smiling world go happily by upon its way towards an unknown doom. In some ways, I think we all kind of do that.
another mind and heart connected.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's quite a challenge to be able to do it.
Mm. Well, she has this knowledge in her mind. She understands what's going to happen, and they don't. But still, she's very close to them in heart. She still, loves them very much, and she is much loved by them, the parents, Satyavan, others around. So she's divided in that sense in the mind from them because of this knowledge, this difference.
But isn't the worst knowledge that knowing whether she will be able to succeed in retrieving the soul, or what lay ahead in terms of resolving this thing? Is it going to all go badly, or is she going to be able to do something?
Yeah, we don't know all what's going through her mind. Sri Aurobindo doesn't say at this point that she's looking ahead and to this challenge of overcoming this fate and that, but
He does say that it's still veiled from her. What's going to happen?
yeah, she
But she must have a clue that something's going to happen different.
yeah, she probably has some sense of it. But now I don't think mainly I think she's kind of just at this more emotional level, swaying in these feelings of grief and fear and happiness and love. And I don't know that she's thinking about it too much. What's going to happen? What am I going to do at this point? She has quite a long way to go yet. Also, she's, as he mentions here, out of her separate self, she looked and saw. She's still quite a bit in her outer mind looking at this. And I don't know that, she's really deeply connected yet with her soul. In the next canto, she's going to go kind of in search of her soul after this grief becomes overwhelming for her and she kind of reaches a crisis. And then a voice comes to her. So she's still a little bit in her outer mind and in her feelings. But she keeps everything within, and she doesn't show any of her deeper feelings, her fears, to the outside world. So to all around her, she seems her usual wonderful self. But towards the end there, he says her graceful daily acts were now a mask. So she's beginning to feel some disconnect between that inner grief and that outer appearance that she keeps. Let's continue.
That she wondered at the fairy
Yeah.
She recognized how the whole world is living and don't know what is going on.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of saying in the beginning there, that I think we all kind of go through life smiling and without really understanding, what's going to come, and or thinking of our own death. We all just kind of think, okay, tomorrow is another day and the sun will rise and we'll just continue. But at some point, that may change. Okay, shall we continue, Sudanya?
Still veiled from her was the silent being within, who sees life's drama pass with unmoved eyes, support the sorrow of the mind and heart, and bears in human breast the world and fate. A glimpse or flashes came, the presence was hid. Only her violent heart and passionate will were pushed in front to meet the immutable doom. Defenseless, nude, bound to her human lot, they had no means to act, no way to save. This she controlled, nothing was shown outside. She was still to them, the child they knew and loved. The sorrowing woman they saw not within. No change was in her beautiful motion seen. A worship embrace all once viewed to serve. She made herself the diligent serve of all, nor spared the labor of broom and jar and well, or close gentle tending, or to heap the fire of altar and kitchen, no slight task allowed to others that her woman's strength might do. In all her acts, a strange divinity shone. Into a simplest movement, she could bring a oneness with earth's glowing robe of light, a lifting up of common acts by love. All love was hers, and its own heavenly cord bound all to all with her as a golden tie.
Thank you. Sri Aurobindo very subtly kind of interjects some and a deep spiritual knowledge or teaching here right in the beginning. He speaks of this inner Purusha consciousness that can stand back from the mind and heart, observing, but detached and unaffected by what happens there. Supports the sorrow of the mind and heart, and bears in human breasts the world and fate. So this is one of the initial but important aims of the yoga, to reach this witness consciousness that can stand back from the mind and heart. Now he just very subtly puts that in here, that this was still veiled from her. She was still mostly confined to her outer mind and heart, though sometimes she might have had glimpses of this, or just touches, flashes of this deeper consciousness that's detached. Instead, she pushes forward her violent heart and passionate will. These things are very strong and developed in her, but they don't really have the capacity to bear and to overcome this kind of pain and suffering that she's confronting. Just like our minds and hearts and will cannot really change our outer nature in any fundamental way. We need to withdraw back into this witness consciousness first, and from there we get first the strength to bear the impacts, assaults of the outer world, the outer consciousness, but then also a means to confront and overcome and change the outer nature. Right, her will can manage that. It can hide her suffering, her pain that she's still feeling, but it can't overcome it. She can't stand back from it as yet. And then there's this other passage that comes describing Savitri's kind of outer nature. And I think one of the things from the original legend of the Mahabharata about Savitri was that she was kind of this ideal woman who, although having this great and powerful consciousness, still tended on all those around and was like the perfect housewife. And that was also, I think, maybe a little bit put forward as the ideal for womanhood in India. But here he describes it very beautifully, how she made herself the diligent serf of all, nor spared the labor of broom and jar and well. Remember, she grew up as a princess. She never had to do all those things before. Or close, gentle tending, or to heap the fire of altar and kitchen. No slight task allowed to others that her woman's strength might do. And then something quite beautiful she brings into all of those activities In all her acts a strange divinity shone. In the simplest movement she could bring a oneness with earth's glowing robe of light, a lifting up of common acts by love. Let's continue. B.
But when her grief to the surface pressed too close, these things, once gracious adjuncts of her joy, seemed meaningless to her, a gleaming shell, or were around mechanical and void, her body's actions shared not by her will. Always behind this strange divided life, her spirit, like a sea of living fire, possessed her lover and to his body clung. One locked embrace to guard its threatened mate. At night, she woke through the slow, silent hours, brooding on the treasure of his bosom and face, hung o'er the sleep-bound beauty of his brow, or laid her burning cheek upon his feet. Waking at morn, her lips endlessly clung to his, unwilling ever to separate again, or lose that honeyed drain of lingering joy, unwilling to loose his body from her breast. The warm, inadequate signs that love must use. Intolerant of the poverty of time, her passion catching at the fugitive hours, willed the expense of centuries in one day of prodigal love and the surf of ecstasy. Or else she strove even in mortal time to build a little room for timelessness by the deep union of two human lives. Her soul secluded, shut into his soul.
Thank you. We have quite a beautiful description of their passionate love that she feels for him especially as she senses that their time is so short. She wants to hold him even closer, tighter to her breast, never to let him go. The warm, inadequate signs that love must use. It's a beautiful line by which he kind of closes that description of their physical love. So she's sensing this poverty of time that she has with Satyavan. And then she willed the expense of centuries in one day. She wanted to live each day to its absolute fullest, that it would seem like a century of experience and love, of prodigal love, love given in abundance, lavishly, and the surf of ecstasy, the crashing waves is the surf. Or else she strove, even in mortal time, to build a little room for timelessness by the deep union of two human lives, her soul secluded, shut into his soul. Perhaps even in that deep union of love, we can experience something of timelessness. In those intense moments of love and unity with another in the soul. Yes?
For me also the line, there's spirit like a sea of living fire. I never thought about the spirit as a sea of living fire. So that is something I really think about it.
Yeah, it's this deep passion she has. It's like a wide expanse of fire.
Yeah, I think that the spirit can have different qualities.
Yeah, it's not like the silent spirit. It's the spirit thrown out into this kind of intense passion and love. All is the spirit, no? It can stand back from all things, but it also, the spirit throws itself into the creation and becomes all this. Here it becomes a sea of living fire. So we'll continue, Jean.
After all was given, she demanded still, even by his strong embrace unsatisfied. She longed to cry, O tender Santavan, O lover of my soul, give more of love while yet thou canst. To her thou lovest. Imprint thyself for every nerve to keep that thrills to thee the message of my heart. For soon we part, and who shall know how long before the great wheel in its monstrous round restores to us restores us to each other and our love. Too well she loved to speak a fateful word and lay her burden on his happy head. She pressed the outsurging grief back into her breast, to dwell within silent, unhelped, alone. But Satyavan sometimes half understood, or felt at least with the uncertain answer of our thought-blinded hearts, the unuttered need, the unplumbed abyss of her deep, passionate want. All of his speeding days that he could spare, from labor in the forest hewing wood and hunting food in the wild sylvan glades, and service to his father's sightless life, he gave to her and helped to increase the hours. But the nearness of his presence and his clasp, and lavish sometimes of heart-seeking words,
We see again that her attempts to flee into this intense love, to forget her grief, to forget, calling more and more from Satyavan, give more. She's feeling this all inside. But too well she loved to speak a fateful word and lay her burden on his happy head. She pressed the outsurging grief back into her breast, to dwell within, silent, unhelped, alone. And then Sri Aurobindo suggests that Satyavan sometimes half understood this deep need that she was feeling and expressing. So he would try to help by giving all the time that he could spare to her.
In a way, she expressed there in her speaking will soon become who shall no more know for the great years. So in a way, she expressed it.
But she doesn't say it out loud. She's only thinking. She's thinking this. Yeah. Too well she loved to speak a fateful word. She doesn't say it. It's just that all of this she's feeling.
She longed to cry.
Yeah. Excuse me? No, he doesn't know about it. Yeah, he senses Savitri's this need that she's feeling for closeness, this intensity with which she's throwing herself in this love. So he senses something, but he doesn't know what it is. And he's just trying to help her to satisfy this longing that she's expressing, to save, to make the most of this time they have together. He senses something, but he doesn't know what. He's just trying to help her satisfy her endless need. So we can continue. You read.
His presence, she forgot a while. Grief filled his absence with its aching touch. She saw the desert of her coming days, imaged in every solitary hour. Although with a vain imaginary bliss of fairy union through death's door of escape, she dreamed of her body robed in funeral flame. She knew she must not clutch that happiness, to die with him and follow, seizing his robe. Across our other countries, travelers glad, into the sweet or terrible beyond. For those sad parents still would need her there, to help the empty remnant of their day. Often it seemed to pain had pressed their quintessence into her single woe, concentrating in her a tortured world, thus in the silent chamber of her soul. Cloistering her love to live with the secret grief, she dwelt like a dumb priest with hidden gods. Unappeased by the veilless offering of her days, lifting to them her sorrow like frankincense, her life the altar, herself the sacrifice.
Thank you. We see in these first lines that when Satyavan goes off for a short time and she's alone, she feels within that hour his absence and that sense of being left alone after he passes away. So each hour that she's alone, she feels that absence which would be coming upon his death. Imagines that she could escape, throw herself on the funeral pyre of Satyavan and escape with him into the worlds beyond. But she realizes also she cannot do that. For his parents would be left behind. His blind father, who would need her help. And they would also be experiencing such grief to be left alone. So she realizes that escape is also not possible. And then he describes how her pain feels like she's absorbing this universal pain and suffering. Often it seemed to her the ages' pain had pressed their quintessence, their essence, into her single woe, concentrating in her a tortured world. She has this deep love, and so within her heart, a kind of a unity with the world around. So she senses also the pain of the whole world. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that, of the avatar experiencing that burden, that pain and suffering of the whole world with which he's united within. She's getting some taste of that herself. And then there's another interesting image. She dwelt like a dumb priest with hidden gods, unappeased by the wordless offering of her days, lifting to them her sorrow like frankincense, her life the altar, herself the sacrifice. So this reminds us of an earlier passage in the beginning of the poem, in the first canto, at the bottom of page 9. All came back to her, earth and love and doom. The ancient disputants encircled her, like giant figures wrestling in the night. The Godheads from the dim inconscient born awoke to struggle and the pang divine, and in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the somber center of the dire debate, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, inheriting the long agony of the globe, a stone-still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed regardless eyes that saw grief's timeless depths, but not life's goal. Afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited unappeased, the daily oblation of her unwept tears. All the fierce question of man's hours relived, the sacrifice of suffering and desire, earth offers to the immortal ecstasy, began again beneath the eternal hand. So he speaks of this circle of gods and this sacrifice of suffering earth offers to the divine bliss, that it may descend. So she's feeling that. So let's continue.
Yet ever they grew into each other more, until it seemed no power could rend apart, since even the body's walls could not divide. So when he wandered in the forest, oft her conscious spirit walked with him, and knew his actions as if in herself he moved. He, less aware, thrilled with her from afar. Always the stature of her passion grew. Grief, fear became the food of mighty love. Increased by its torment, it filled the whole world. It was all her life, became her whole earth and heaven. Although life-born, an infant of the hours, immortal it walked, unslayable as the gods. Her spirit stretched measureless in strength divine, an anvil for the blows of fate and time, or tired of sorrow's passionate luxury. Grief's self became calm, dull-eyed, resolute, awaiting some issue of its fiery struggle, some deed in which it might forever seize, victorious over itself and death and tears. The year now paused upon the brink of change. No more the storms sailed with stupendous wings, and thunder strode in wrath across the world. But still was heard a muttering in the sky, and rain dripped wearily through the mournful air, and grew slow drifting clouds shut in the earth. So her grief's heavy sky shut in her heart. A still self hid behind, but gave no light. No voice came down from the forgotten heights. Only in the privacy of its brooding pain, her human heart spoke to the body's fate.
Thank you. So that's the end of Canto 1. It's interesting how there is this interaction between her love and her fear and dread and grief. She feels this grief, this foreboding sense of Satyavan's coming death becomes overpowering, so she throws herself more intensely into love. And the more she throws herself into love, the more intense, all-consuming this pain and suffering becomes. And then there's this quite a beautiful image of Satyavan when he would wander into the forest to do his work. That Savitri's spirit would kind of follow him. She could sense his presence, what he was doing. That kind of intense oneness of love can bring us into some kind of a deeper unity with the other person, such that we move with them, we feel their presence even when they're far away. Yeah, let's see. her spirit stretched measureless in strength divine, an anvil for the blows of fate and time. So that's what she's become, in a sense. She's become this crucible in which are concentrated all this meeting of the gods of pain and suffering, the gods of love and joy. All of these are meeting in her heart to battle, to work out their fate. So it's as if she's become the anvil on which this hammering of fate and time are being struck. Right. Well, he's saying here she realizes that she can't follow him in death because she loves, his family too much. She realizes that they would be left alone. So this is just more of a passing thought that comes to her, this idea that she could follow him in death. But she knows she cannot do that. So as time goes on, she's going to confront this fate and death. She's going to, rise up and do that. At this point, she hasn't come to that point within that she's ready to take this on. Only she's feeling this intense pain and suffering, this intense love. She's swaying between these different feelings. She's not ready yet. We see in the coming cantos, she's going to receive a call from deep within herself, from her soul, that she has to rise and confront this pain and this fate that's facing her now. But that is only coming soon, maybe on the next couple pages.
It's interesting how he brings it back again to the weather.
Yeah.
Because we had that terrible summer, we had the spring, so she's got 1 year. So he's linked it all the way through consistently with metaphors, the weather, because I think the weather gives a more dramatic feeling to these feelings. This is in her winter of discontent now.
Right.
So that really highlights the feeling. She's in the bottom. Then she'll have to go deeper into the soul to get out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful how Sri Aurobindo always keeps following the story along with the following of the seasons. And at the same time, he is describing quite beautifully as these seasons pass, the seasons themselves, this beautiful imagery. No more the storms sailed with stupendous wings, and thunder strode in wrath across the world. but still was heard a muttering in the sky, and rain dripped wearily through the mournful air, and gray, slow-drifting clouds shut in the earth. So her grief's heavy sky shut in her heart. And then even towards the end of his description of her inner state after the anvil for the blows of fate and time, he says, or tired of sorrow's passionate luxury, grief's self became calm, dull-eyed, resolute, awaiting some issue of its fiery struggle, some deed in which it might forever cease, victorious over itself and death and tears. That kind of foreshadows this change in the climate. First, she's like this anvil for the blows of fate and time, and then it changes, or grief's self became calm. So this is like now the weather is changing from the storms to the dripping, rain dripped wearily through the mournful air. So just like her mood, he follows with the change in the weather. Okay, I think perhaps we'll stop there for today.
There's one other point that he makes, that at that state, we don't get any extra help from heaven. Like no voice, there was no other resource.
Right.
So she has to hit that full bottom.
Yeah.
The end, that. There's, no help from anybody.
Yeah, as long as she's just has her violent heart and her will, it's not enough. It doesn't help.
She has to talk to her own body. The heart has to speak to the body. She's completely closed against that wound that she knows herself. And she's all up.
I don't understand this line so much. The human heart goes to the body state. The body state is ja more Satyavan, ne?
The body's fate is the impending death. Death of the body. Only her human heart, only her love, her will, only that she had to confront this fate. She still didn't have the strength of her soul or the silence and detachment of this witness self. All of that was still hidden from her.
So then the body state is impersonal, it's not personal. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fate, the outer fate of death. That's the fate of our body. Okay, so we have some music.
Bhavan sometimes half understood the unplumbed abyss of her deep, passionate want. Yet ever they grew into each other more, until it seemed no power could rend apart, since even the body's walls could not divide. For when he wandered into the forest, oft her conscious spirit walked with him anew, his actions as if in herself he moved. He, less aware, thrilled with her from afar.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.